The false dilemma fallacy, sometimes called the black-white fallacy, poses an either-or choice. The arguer suggests that only two alternatives exist, either A or B, although there may be other explanations of or solutions to the problem under discussion. The false dilemma reflects the simplification of a complex problem. Sometimes it is offered out of a lack of awareness of alternatives on offer, but sometimes it is also used to divert attention away from a more effective solution that the arguer does not want you to notice. A common false dilemma you hear in all walks of life is you are either on one side or another, for or against, in or out. Sometimes the arguer can be quite emotional when delivering the ultimatum. But a moment's reflection will let you see that there are at least two perfectly reasonable alternative positions that you can decide to take. One is that you are totally indifferent to either side and decide not to involve yourself with one side or another. The other is that you believe that you have not sufficient information to make an informed decision one way or the other. You may, in that situation, put your decision-making on hold while you do further research on the question. The slippery slope fallacy. If an arguer predicts that taking a first step will lead inevitably to a second step, he or she must provide evidence that this will happen. Otherwise, the arguer is guilty of a slippery slope fallacy. The metaphor of a slippery slope is based on the idea that if you take one step down a slippery slope, you run the risk of finding yourself sliding downwards at an ever-increasing speed until you reach the bottom. The further down the slope you get, the harder it is to stop. After a while, you can't stop, even if you desperately want to. Some slippery slope arguments have been used in proposed changes to the Irish Constitution. On divorce and abortion, the cry was that once any form of divorce was allowed, then over time the restrictions put in place to assure the anti-divorce lobby would be lifted and there would be a stampede of people looking for quick divorces with few restrictions. On the abortion issue, the argument put forward was that once the first step was taken to make abortion available in very limited circumstances, then you are on a slippery slope, which would eventually lead to abortion on demand. In both of these cases, evidence should have to be produced that these outcomes would be likely to happen. The straw man fallacy consists of an attack on a view similar to, but not the same as the one your opponent holds. It is a familiar tactic used by everybody here on a regular basis. If we find it difficult to answer a direct question, sometimes we divert attention away from the question and create a straw man in the form of an argument that can be easily refuted. This straw man argument will probably contain some reference to the question posed to you. Politicians are masters of the straw man fallacy. Minister, how do you account for another record-breaking year of patients on hospital trolleys? I do not know how you could even ask that question when your government slashed the health budget after the financial crisis. Since gaining office, we have increased the health budget by 120%. Here the minister creates a straw man or easy target, which he knows he can easily knock down by referring to the cost-cutting that went on in the health service on the questioner's watch. While it is often tempting to set up and topple easy targets, this activity has no place in critical thinking, other than you being aware of the tactic. Two wrongs make a right. This is another example of the way in which attention may be diverted away from the question at issue. If, for example, one party or nation accuses the other of breaking the law or denying human rights to their citizens, then the other side might point out the accuser's record in this area. This tactic is an attempt to divert attention away from the original accusation. Write down 3 examples of this fallacy from your own life experience. Non sequitur. The Latin term non sequitur means it does not follow. If I flip a coin and it comes down heads 4 times in a row, I may be tempted to make the statement that the chances have improved that my next flip will come down tails. But if I made that statement, I would be guilty of a non sequitur fallacy, as the odds would be 50-50 each time. It would not follow that because heads came down 20 times in a row, that the odds would have improved that tails would come down on my next flip. This particular non sequitur example also has a gambler's fallacy built in. This is the fallacy that the chance of winning increase the more times you lose. Most lottery jackpots have been won by quick pick tickets. Therefore, my odds are better if I buy a quick pick ticket. Why is this an example of a non sequitur fallacy? Can you think of some more examples of non sequitur fallacies in relation to lottery tickets? My odds of winning increase the more draws I enter. The number 7 has not come up in the last 20 winning combinations, so the odds are greater that it will come up in the next 20 winning combinations. Can you give me 3 more examples of non sequiturs? The ad populum fallacy. Arguers guilty of this fallacy make an appeal to the prejudices of the people. They feel that they do not need to support their claims with any evidence because their audience have prejudices already in place around topics such as immigration, abortion, wealth distribution, etc. If you feed these prejudices, then you can win popular support. No surprise then that some politicians are masters of the ad populum fallacy. The bad reasons fallacy is the mistake of assuming that if the reasons given for a conclusion are false, then the conclusion itself must be false. Or putting it another way, just because someone's reasons for believing something are bad reasons, it does not follow that what they believe in is untrue. In this example, premise 1 is false, because some fish give birth to live young. Premise 2 is also false, because the duck-billed platypus is not a fish. The conclusion, however, is true, since duck-billed platypuses do lay eggs. Bad reasons fallacies. What you can state here is that the person who holds a belief on the basis of false premises has not adequately justified their belief. You would be committing the bad reason fallacy if you thought that by undermining the way a conclusion was reached, you had shown that conclusion to be false. A democratic fallacy is an unreliable method of reasoning, which treats majority opinion as revealed by voting as a source of truth and a reliable guide for action on every question. Political democracy is a useful check on would-be tyrants, but there are many areas of life in which taking a vote would be an extremely unreliable way of discovering the most appropriate course of action. Those who accept the democratic fallacy feel a need to put decisions to the vote wherever possible, assuming that this is the best strategy for making sensible decisions. But obviously, if the majority of voters are ignorant of the matter on which they are voting, this is likely to be reflected in their voting pattern. Would you take a vote to make an emergency landing on a plane you are travelling on, or leave the decision to the captain?